Hello, everyone, and welcome to our group's debate for SPCE619. Our topic that we will be presenting on is service delivery for transition age youth and adults, empowerment versus care. We have chosen to present our topic using an informal format, which we felt would give us a more relaxed discussion while still presenting effective arguments and information. Before we go ahead and get started, I first want to introduce myself and the rest of our group members. My name is Rachel McManaman. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I will be the introducer for both sides of our debate. So I will be introducing both the empowerment and care sides of the debate. Other members of our group include Nikki Powell from Huntington, West Virginia, who will be the summarizer for both sides of the debate. Amy Brown from Dayton, Ohio, who will be presenting the research for the empowerment side. Brooke Plummer from South Point, Ohio, who will be presenting supporting research for the care side of the debate. Jamie Borer from Columbus, Ohio, who will be presenting some visual illustrations and supporting explanations for both sides of the debate. And lastly, Elizabeth Smith from Alexandria, Virginia, who will be fielding questions throughout the debate in order to facilitate our arguments. I will then make some closing remarks, and the entire group will end the debate by opening it up to questions. So once again, our debate topic is service delivery for transition age youth and adults, empowerment versus care. In this case, service delivery is referring to those services that are discussed and put in place when an individual is transitioning from a school setting, such as high school, to a more community-based setting. This transition is very important in a person's life, as this is when decisions are being made about goals that they may have for their future and what types of activities they may want to engage in that will help them become a productive adult in society. Many feel that youth and adults with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, should be empowered to live their lives with the most independence possible. And this includes making choices about education, employment, independent living, relationships or getting married, and really any and all choices that you, I, and all adults make at some point about how we live our daily lives. On the other hand, providers of these post-secondary adult services have many concerns about how much independence they are really able to grant these individuals because of concerns that are issues that may be related to safety, liability, costs, and lack of resources. So we're going to start looking at empowerment and the legal and ethical reasons that individuals with ASD should be empowered to have more choice when it comes to their post-secondary activities and life goals, which Nikki will discuss in more detail. Elizabeth will then ask any questions that may help give us a more rounded look at the topic, and Amy and Jamie will provide research and visuals to give us a better understanding of the argument. So at this point, I will turn it over to Nikki, who is going to summarize the empowerment side of our debate.
Empowerment of individuals with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, promotes independence, self-efficacy, self-advocacy, and community integration. For individuals living with an intellectual disability, making choices in day-to-day activities and life, such as where to live, who to live with, and how to spend time in the community, can be challenging. Regardless of how the person with a disability functions, the power to choose and make decisions is often guided and directed by family members or professionals. Being person-centered is about empowering individuals to make their own choices for the future. If you have no disability, you may not have given much thought to the financial, psychological, and emotional ramifications of not being able to do things independently. You may not be aware of the painful discrimination in all areas of life that persons with disabilities face daily. These discriminations send a message to persons with disabilities that they are not worthy, which is why empowerment is so important. We never want a person with a disability to feel less than. According to the Behavior Analyst Certification Board Code of Ethics 2.09, It is the responsibility of the behavior analyst to advocate for the appropriate amount and level of service provision and oversight required to meet the defined behavior change program. Care that is not warranted should not be sought out. Individuals have a right to make their own decisions if they are capable of doing so.
What is being done to ensure that individuals with ASD are actively involved in their transition process?
Waymer and colleagues in 2004 brought up a good point about the Individuals with Disability Education Act of 1990, where individuals attended their IEP meetings and helped in the planning process at the age of 16. This empowers the individuals and allows for self-advocacy. They also found that with more research, there's a possible correlation between self-determination, independence, and then more likely to obtain a job. It is a great skill to have and to be able to communicate what you want and need, or even what you don't want. It's giving individuals a voice to speak on their own behalf and to be actively involved. These IEP meetings are meant to provide each individual with the skills needed to be successful in the future. Who then would be better to speak about what they intend to do than the actual individual? Hagner and colleagues in 2012 also looked at a family-based planning that provided support to find available resources that will prepare the individual as well. Using a family-based or even client-centered program helps the individuals have a true say, or as much as they can, in the outcomes of their own life. Carr and colleagues in 1999 founded that more the individuals are engaged with the process of picking their desired adult role or their possible jobs, that the more successful the transition went. And finally, I think it's important to mention that our own ethics code of compliance 4.02 involving clients in planning and consent states that the behavior analyst should involve the client in planning and consent for their own behavior change program, in our case, in their transition to adulthood.
What contributes to success for individuals with ASD being not only successful, but also being satisfied with their life choices?
Again, research founded by Lorenz in 2015 found that the higher an individual with ASD was satisfied in their work, the happier they would be with their life. They also reported that a job set up to help individuals will allow for a more positive outcome for the job, and then inadvertently their self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is important because it leads to not only being successful in their job, but giving them the will to keep accomplishing new goals. Some ways that Lorenz measured to help those with ASD in a work environment was by using self-solution, which is acceptance, avoidance, communication, or practice. And he also offered external help, which is private or work environments, or even having a third party that assists the individual with their work. Lee and Carter in 2012 also looked at helping prepare individuals with high-functioning ASD for meaningful work. They really focused on providing these individuals with hands-on vocational skills, job counseling, career assessments early on in the transition process. They also found that with these transitional pieces, it provided those individuals with ASD a higher quality of life and more career choices. With new career choices, they are not held back or restricted from following any dreams they held for themselves. And I believe that both of these articles really show our core ethical principles of respecting autonomy by providing ways for these individuals with ASD and allowing for more opportunities to promote their independence.
Hi everyone. The first visual I have to share with everybody is a empowerment side for individuals with autism and employment opportunities. So this is research from Butterworth and colleagues 2014, and this table includes the client's level of intelligence, race, ethnicity, gender, and overall health ratings. And based on the findings of their study, only about 14% of males with an autism diagnosis were employed and 6% for females. Interestingly, even the individuals with excellent health ratings consisted of 14% of employment. And since we have a p-value less than 0.05, our data is significant.
Thank you, Nikki, Amy, Elizabeth, and Jamie for giving us a look at why empowering individuals with ASD is so important and how it can really improve their quality of life. We now know that there are laws in place, such as IDEA, as well as ethical codes within our own field, such as Ethics Code 2.09 from the BACB ethical guidelines, that mandate that needed services are provided in a way that best suits each individual. We are now going to hear about transition services from the perspective of service providers. Nikki will summarize the concerns of the care and service providers. Elizabeth will then ask questions regarding what is ethical in providing these services. And Brooke and Jamie will provide research and illustrations to further support this information, and we will wrap up with closing questions and statements. So at this point, I will turn it back over to Nikki, who will summarize the argument for the care side of the debate.
As service providers and those caring for individuals with ASD, we also want to promote independence and autonomy. However, it is important that the treatment is still ethical and appropriate. Providers of post-secondary adult services are very important to the IDD population, including persons with autism spectrum disorder. It is the job of the provider to ensure that each individual reaches their full human potential, which may not be the same potential as one of their peers. Providers are to empower individuals to make good choices with the provider's assistance, to ensure safety, not just safety from bodily harm, but safety from exploitation and coercion. Having a provider available to a person with ASD provides a safety net for these individuals to ensure that they are not alone in this world, left to fend for themselves, while attempting to reach short and long-term goals with assistance. According to the Ethics Code 2.0, behavior analysts' responsibility to clients states that behavior analysts have a responsibility to operate in the best interest of the clients. The term client, as used here, is broadly applicable to whomever behavior analysts provide services, whether it is an individual person, a parent or guardian of a service recipient, an organizational representative, a public or private organization, firm, or corporation. This section of the code recognizes a provider as a person that may make decisions for a person with a disability.
Our clients have a right to effective treatment, but how do we ensure autonomy while also making sure that the treatment is effective and builds on the client's existing skill set?
Behavioral health providers are obligated to ensure that all clients served are provided treatment that is individualized and effective. They must not only do this from a moral standpoint, but also because there are rules and regulations that govern all providers, which dictate the standards that must be met when implementing said services and allow the provider to have a license. For example, I have worked for 17 years in this field, and 15 of those years was in the state of West Virginia. The ICF regulations have tag numbers that address each area of services provided. 96 falls under the active treatment standard, and it states, each client must receive a continuous active treatment program, which includes aggressive, consistent implementation of a program of specialized and generic training, health services, and related services described in this subpart. That is directed toward the acquisition of the behaviors necessary for the client to function with as much self-determination and independence as possible, and the prevention or deceleration of regression or loss of current optimal functional status. There is also a governing body tag, which is W104, and this tag addresses all members of management within the provider as being accountable to ensure all individual tag areas are addressed. The provider does not comply with these regulations, as well as regulations from any other state. They are cited using the tag numbers and must do what is known as a plan of correction to resolve the issue. Given too many tags or citations can lead to a provider facility in the state. The philosophy is the client's needs must come first, and therefore not providing effective treatment can be grounds for loss of licensure.
The BACB's Professional and Ethical Compliance Code, Section 4.02, as was previously mentioned, discusses the importance of involving clients in the planning process. But how is this similar or different to IDEA 2004, emphasizing client participation and transition planning at the age of 16? How do we balance client participation and effective treatment?
The difference between involving the client in the planning process versus IDEA mandating client participation is that mandating means the client has to be present and accounted for during the planning process, whereas client involvement requires that the team of professionals that are working with that client actually make the client responsible for the activities, the living arrangements, programming, recreational events, or anything that he or she will be participating in. That the team discuss the wants, the needs, and the desires of the client with that client directly, and that they value his or her input. And it ultimately means the client will direct his or her service plan. When it comes to balancing client participation and effective treatment, if the client is directly involved in their treatment plan, a team of professionals, then participation will be a given. If the client is making choices and the provider's team of professionals are guiding that client to make the most appropriate choices for the treatment implementation options, the balance should be built in as long as ongoing evaluation of treatment plans takes place by the provider professionals.
The next figure we have is representing the care side. So this is research from Watson and colleagues, 2011. Regarding the transitional care model, this figure represents 18 different service models used for children with health needs, including autism, diabetes, and cerebral palsy. So this figure is summarizing components from normalization process theory, and I will discuss the 4 components of that theory with everyone. So the first one is coherence. So what is the work? Cognitive participation, who does the work? Collective action, how does the work get done? And reflexive monitoring, how is the work understood? So this is in accordance to implementing transition services for individuals with autism. And the shaded boxes in this figure represent different transition categories used from the research.
Thank you, Nikki, Brooke, Elizabeth, and Jamie for explaining the ethical and legal considerations that providers need to keep in mind when providing services to individuals with ASD, and also helping them transition from school into the community. We now have an understanding that providers do want to provide the best care for the people that they serve, but there may be many different state mandated guidelines that dictate how their services are delivered. We have now heard from both sides of our debate, and we hope that this gave those watching some insight into some of the legal and ethical factors that affect the way that providers are able to empower youth and adults with autism spectrum disorder. We will now be concluding our presentation by answering some questions asked by Dr. Bassett.
So what is the ethical responsibility of BCBAs in terms of assisting clients transitioning between settings?
In terms of assisting clients transitioning between settings, so from a school setting to a community setting, the ethical responsibilities of BCBAs in this case can mainly be found and outlined in the ethical codes of the BACB. Mostly in Section 2, which many of these were mentioned previously in the debate, but I will briefly go over them. Codes 2.02 and 2.04 both discuss that the BCBA's main responsibility should always be to the client, especially when working with third parties. So in the case of transition services, third parties are going to be considered those professionals that may be working within the school that the client is attending, or those professionals that are going to be working with the individual in the community once they've established services. So the BCBA should always keep in mind that their main responsibility is to the client's goals and helping them achieve their wants and needs, and not necessarily to those of the third parties. Code 2.03 states that the BCBA should provide appropriate consultation and referrals based on the needs of the client. And so in this case, again, with transition, any referrals that are made are most likely going to be related to community programs and any support that the client may need to be successful, such as a job coach if the client wished to obtain employment. They may need this type of support in a job setting to be able to be successful and do their job effectively. Code 2.05 talks about supporting clients' rights. A BCBA should, always be looking out for their client, and this should involve having extensive knowledge of what the federal and state laws are regarding their client services, and many of these, such as IDEA and other laws were mentioned in this debate. The BCBA should always be aware of what their clients' rights are and how to advocate for these throughout the transition process. And then it was also discussed that clients have the right to effective treatment. So BCBA should always be basing their interventions on the most up-to-date research, and they should be encouraging other professionals that are working with the client, either in the school or community setting, to do the same. And if they are not aware of the most up-to-date research and effective treatments, then the BCBA should at least be discussing these with other professionals and making them aware of what the best treatment is and how it can help the client. And then, not in Section 2, but in Section 4 of the ethical codes, which was also mentioned previously, Code 4.02, talks about involving the client in the planning process as much as possible. And the BCBA, although they only have one role, in the client, the client is going to be working with a lot of other professionals, but it's very important that they advocate for the client and potentially their family if those people are involved in the client's life, to really be involved in the planning process, to be making decisions, making their voices heard, and then assisting that client with, working with the other professionals to see how their goals can effectively be reached.
Okay, and how can behavior analysts help ensure empowerment is occurring for the clients?
We really can't talk about the code 4.02 enough, but it really does help in all aspects of clients who are transitioning's lives. It's helping them ensure that they have effective treatment. It's helping ensure that we are involving them, but it also will help empower them so they know that their voice is being heard and that it's important for their voice to be heard. Let's say they move from a setting with us with a BCBA who knows that they need to involve this person in the planning process. They go and are receiving some service somewhere else, not necessarily ABA services, but some other form of service, and their voice isn't being heard as much. At least they know that that's not right, and that they need to speak up and have their voice heard and be involved in the planning process. Code 4.09 is also extremely applicable for empowerment. It talks about the least restrictive environment, which I think we kind of overlook when it comes to empowerment, but it's really important for the environment that we're providing treatment in to be the least restrictive environment. So that way we are promoting that independence and we're showing them that you can do this by yourself, and they're being built up to that. I can do this by myself, I'm proud of what I can do. And we also want to give our clients a choice in their programming whenever it's possible, because just showing them that they can choose which way we do this is also going to empower them to speak up in future instances.
All right, and our last question is, do you have any personal experience related to this topic that you would like to share?
I'll start. Hi, I'm Nikki. I've worked in the field of IDD for over 10 years now. I currently work for one of the largest behavioral health agencies in the nation as a program manager. In my time there, I've managed a facility-based day program, ICF residential homes, natural family setting, and Title 19 waiver funded in a residential setting. Empowerment versus care is an age-old question. Of course, from a provider standpoint, I struggle with empowerment versus safety. I want my clients to be empowered to make their own decisions and to have as much input as possible in their life, but all the while ensuring their safety and ensuring that they are not exploited or taken advantage of. But from experience, that sometimes comes with coddling them or treating them as we would our own children because we want to ensure their safety, whether it be physical, mental, or emotional well-being.
Okay, I will go next. I'm Rachel. My personal experience with this topic mostly comes from my work as a case manager in community mental health, and I did that for about 4 to 5 years, working mainly with adults with autism and other developmental disabilities. And what I found a lot when working with this population is that they would express a desire, to get a job, to get married, just really make like a big decision about their life, even just where to live. A lot of people want to move out of their parents' home at some point. And I always found that as a case manager and as someone that's working with these people, that you want to empower them and really advocate for their wants and needs to be met. You want them to achieve their goals and to be happy. But I did find that there was a lot of red tape when trying to achieve these goals in terms of the funding, which in this case was Medicaid. There was also a lot of safety issues that providers had concerns about, and they are held liable if anything happens to the client while in their care. So that was a main concern. So really, as much as providers, I think, do want what's best for the client, there are a lot of guidelines within the system that unfortunately prevent individuals with autism and other disabilities from really reaching their full potential or achieving the things that they would want to in their life.
So I have unfortunately not had as much as experience in this topic. I mainly work with children that are about 7 to 11 years old in a modified classroom, and we focus on ABA therapy. But for the past year and a half, I've been working with an in-home client that's 19 years old. I actually chose this topic because I wanted to learn more about that transitional period that my client will be going through here soon. I wanted to be able to advocate for him and to leave him with the skills that will empower him through his adulthood. I wanted him to be able to work and be as independent as possible. I think it's his personal right to be able to do his part in society, and with the right help, I fully believe he can, and he will.
All right, I'm Brooke, and my personal experience with this particular topic is pretty extensive. I've been dealing with this for about 17 years now. As a direct care staff, a case manager, QMRP, and a clinical supervisor, my role was always to encourage the client and advocate for the client to ensure the client's voice was heard and the desires of that client were taken into account before any major decisions were made. However, once I started working on the administrative side of the provider, I was faced with dealing with the other side of that, which is, if a client made a bad decision that ended poorly or made one that was not in his or her best interest, I would often have to deal with outside community members, such as police officers, EMS workers, hospital staff, physicians, and many times state surveyors, who obviously grant us our licensure to operate. So I can see the arguments for both sides of the debate, and know that in reality that many of the decisions that the people we serve make require some type of guidance from us as professionals. And I know that the level of true informed consent is not 100% in any case, because if it was, we would not be providing services to these individuals.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I also have experience working as a case manager, primarily in outpatient community mental health centers. I've worked with adults and some children with autism and developmental disabilities. So I would see the clients once a month in the office, and I would usually communicate with the direct staff who would bring the client, and sometimes the house manager, depending on the appointment. And one of the biggest challenges that I had in this position was feeling like I could not do enough for a client, which hinders my responsibility to the client. And of course, we want to advocate for the client. We want them to be independent, participate in the community. And there were times where I felt like I didn't have enough guidance from staff. I would get short on comments like everything is fine or nothing has changed. And being able to have a job and being independent is so important. And when we talk about our jobs in everyday conversation, it's such a big part of our lives. And whether you have a disability or not, you should have the right to work and be able to tell your friends and your family what you like about your job or what you don't like about your job. So on a positive note, throughout that position I did have some clients that were able to tell me what they did in their work and what they liked about it.
I'll go next. So I had kind of an interesting experience with transition age students. When I was actually in high school, my first exposure to ABA was as an intern in a transition age classroom. So the students were actually older than me. They were 18 to 21 years old, and every single one of them was in a vocational placement that the school had chosen for them. The way their program worked was they went to the vocational program half the day, and then they were at the school the rest of the day, and they were working on skills for their job, or they were working on basic living skills. Some of the kids functioning level where they could tell us what they liked and didn't like about their job, and those students were able to change their vocational placement if they were unhappy with it, or if they wanted to come up with something else that they wanted to do. Then they would go through the process of, this is how you fill out an application, this is the opportunities that are available to you, and they would kind of talk them through that process so that they could do that on their own someday. The students who weren't as actively involved in the process, their programs at the school focused more on empowering them to speak up about things, or giving them more so that they were able to say, this is what I want to do, this is what I don't want to do. And they did a lot of the group collaborating to come up with projects to do at the school. So they all made like a garden, and they sold the flowers to people at the school, and they did everything from going to the store and buying the soil and planting the soil and watering it every day, to packaging them up and delivering them to people and dealing with the money. So it was really interesting to see all the different things they did, and how they had, even if it was small choices in the process, having some kind of say in it, which was really interesting.
All right, thank you everyone. That concludes our debate and our presentation on service delivery for transition age youth and adults, empowerment versus care. We hope you found the information useful and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.